Fluorescent lights of the grocery store aisle hummed above me with a persistent, headache-inducing buzz, a stark contrast to the sudden, sharp ringing in my ears. I was standing in the dairy section, reaching for a carton of almond milk, when a man in a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit tapped me aggressively on the shoulder. He didn't smile or offer a greeting. He simply asked my name in a monotone voice, shoved a thick, heavy envelope into my hand, and walked away before I could even blink or ask a question. My hands trembled violently as I tore open the seal right there next to the yogurts, ignoring the curious, judgmental stares of other shoppers who had witnessed the ambush. I scanned the dense legal jargon, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird desperately trying to escape a cage. It was a court motion from my ex-husband, Merrick. We had been divorced for 6 months, but his cruelty apparently had no expiration date. He wasn't just filing a motion to lower his monthly child support payments because of a change in circumstance. He was demanding a court-ordered paternity test with the specific intent to terminate all parental rights and financial obligations immediately. Just as the paper slipped from my numb fingers and fluttered to the linoleum floor, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw a text message from him. It popped up on the screen, cold and venomous. "I'm tired of paying for a kid who doesn't even look like me. The ATM is closed." I looked down at the legal papers, feeling the ground beneath me shift. He was attacking our 5-year-old son, Penn, just to save a few dollars. I didn't go home to cry. I drove straight to Merrick's penthouse, the one he had fought so hard to keep during the divorce proceedings. My blood was boiling, heating my skin and narrowing my vision to a singular point of rage. When he opened the heavy oak door, he wasn't alone. Zayla, his 24-year-old fiancée, was lounging on the Italian leather sofa, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression. She looked up and smirked, a look that said she knew exactly why I was there, and she was enjoying every second of it. "You are insane," I spat at him, waving the crumpled papers in his face. "Penn is 5 years old, Merrick. You are his father. We did IVF. We went to a clinic. How could I possibly have cheated when we used a medical laboratory to conceive?" Merrick laughed, a dry, humorless sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking at me with pure disdain. "Penn has green eyes, Aloan. Look at me. Look at my family. We have brown eyes, dark brown, almost black. No one in the last name lineage has green eyes. You slipped up. You cheated and you got caught." I was baffled. The science was on my side, or so I thought. "You want a test?" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Fine, but when it comes back positive, I am doubling the support request. I will bleed you dry for this insult." "Deal," Merrick said, his eyes cold and dead. "But when it comes back negative, you get nothing, not a single cent." The day of the test was a nightmare that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The clinic smelled of antiseptic, latex, and fear. Penn, my sweet, sensitive boy, was terrified of the doctors and the needles he saw on the trays. He clung to my leg, burying his face in the fabric of my jeans, sobbing quietly. "No, Mommy, no, ouch," he whimpered. My heart broke into a million pieces. I knelt down, whispering soothing words, promising him ice cream and a new toy if he could just be brave for 1 minute. Merrick stood in the far corner of the exam room, leaning casually against the wall. He was scrolling through his phone, completely ignoring the crying child he had raised for 5 years. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't offer a kind word. He looked at Penn like he was a stranger, or worse, a bad investment that he was trying to liquidate. When the nurse came in with the swab, Merrick finally spoke. He didn't speak to his son. He spoke to the nurse, his voice dripping with accusation. "Make sure she doesn't swap the labels," he sneered, pointing a finger at me. "She's desperate. I want a strict chain of custody on this sample." I held Penn's shaking shoulders as the nurse swabbed his cheek. I looked at Merrick, really looked at him, and realized that the man I had once loved was truly dead. There was no father there, only a monster obsessed with his bank account. 2 weeks of agonizing silence followed. I barely slept, tossing and turning as I replayed every moment of our marriage, wondering how he could be so delusional. Finally, the call came. We met in the doctor's private office. The air was thick enough to choke on. The doctor, a gray-haired man with a serious face, sat behind a large mahogany desk. He held a single sheet of paper that contained our fate. Merrick was bouncing his leg, a triumphant grin already plastered on his face. Zayla was waiting in the car downstairs, probably picking out new furniture with the money they thought they were saving by disowning Penn. The doctor cleared his throat and slid the paper across the desk toward us. "I have the results," he said softly, his eyes flicking to me with pity. "Mr. Last Name is excluded as the biological father." The world stopped spinning, the room tilted, I couldn't breathe. "What?" I whispered, the sound barely audible. Merrick jumped up, throwing his hands in the air. I knew it," he shouted, pointing a finger at me. "You dirty cheater, I knew you were lying." He grabbed the paper, waving it like a trophy. "I'm free, I don't owe you a dime." He stormed out of the office, high-fiving his lawyer in the hallway. I sat there, frozen in the chair. I vomited into the trash can beside the desk, my body rejecting the reality. I knew I hadn't cheated. I knew it in my soul. But the paper said otherwise. I felt like I was losing my mind. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. How was this possible? I wasn't crazy. I hadn't been with anyone else. We had done in vitro fertilization because Merrick had low motility, or so he claimed at the time. My mind drifted back to the clinic 5 years ago. I remembered the day of the procedure vividly. Merrick had been weirdly specific about everything. He had been paranoid about privacy. He had insisted on a private donation room, refusing the standard clinic facilities because he claimed the pressure was too much. Then a darker memory surfaced, chilling me to the bone. He had insisted on transporting the sample cup from home to the clinic himself. He told me it was to save money on the collection fees, and at the time, I believed him because he was always frugal. He had driven the sample over while I was prepping for surgery. I wiped my eyes, a cold, hard chill running down my spine. He had handled the biological material alone. He had the opportunity to switch it. But why? If he wasn't the father, whose sample did he bring to the clinic? A stranger's? It didn't make sense. Why would he sabotage his own desire for a family? I drove home in a fog, terrified of telling Penn that his father had just disowned him. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a package sitting on the doorstep. It was wrapped in brown paper with foreign stamps. I picked it up. It was a birthday gift for Penn, arriving a few days late. The return address was from Zurich, Switzerland. It was from Calloway, Merrick's estranged brother. Calloway was the black sheep of the family, an artist who traveled the world and rarely spoke to Merrick because of their deep-seated rivalry. I opened the box. Inside was a beautiful, hand-carved wooden horse, and a note. Saw this and thought of the little guy. Hope he has your smile. I stared at the note, and then I thought about Merrick's accusation in the penthouse. No one in my family has green eyes. My breath hitched in my chest. I ran to the bookshelf and grabbed my wedding album. I frantically flipped the pages until I found the one photo of Calloway who had stood in the back of the group shots. I zoomed in with a magnifying glass. There they were, emerald green eyes, the exact same shade as Penn's. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and dialed the international number I had for Calloway. It rang and rang, the sound echoing my anxiety. Finally, a groggy voice answered. "Hello." "Calloway, it's Aloan," I said, my voice shaking so hard I could barely speak. "I need you to tell me the truth. Did you sleep with me?" There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What? Aloan, are you drunk?" "No, I haven't seen you since the wedding and we barely spoke then. I was in Europe." "Merrick just took a DNA test," I said, tears streaming down my face again. "He isn't Penn's father, but Penn has your eyes, Calloway. He has your eyes." The line went dead silent for a long time. Then Calloway let out a breath that sounded like a curse. "That son of a," he whispered. "Tell me," I demanded. 5 years ago, Calloway said, his voice hard with anger. "Merrick asked me for a favor, a weird one. He said he was scared to go to a doctor to check his fertility. He asked for a sample of mine to compare it to his own using a home kit. He swore he threw it away afterward. I thought he was just being his usual insecure self. I never dreamed he would use it." "He stole it," I whispered, the horror washing over me. He used your sample to inseminate me because he was sterile and too proud to admit it. He tricked the clinic. I'm coming there, Calloway said immediately. I'm getting on the next flight out of Zurich. 2 days later, Calloway was in my living room. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked tired from the travel, but kind. Penn walked into the room, shyly holding his new wooden horse. Calloway knelt down to eye level. "Hi, Penn," he said gently. Penn looked at him and then he smiled, a lopsided, goofy grin. It was like looking in a mirror. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just the eyes, it was the nose, the chin, the laugh. "We need to know for sure," Calloway said, looking at me with intense sadness. "I brought a private test kit." We did the swab right there at the kitchen table. Then we waited. 24 hours of agonizing waiting. We barely spoke. We just watched Penn play, the heavy secret hanging in the air between us, knowing that the results would change everything. The email arrived the next evening. I opened it on my laptop, Calloway standing behind me, his hand gripping the back of my chair so hard his knuckles were white. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Calloway let out a ragged breath. I covered my mouth to stifle a sob. Calloway was Penn's father. The truth was sickening. Merrick, the man obsessed with his image and his legacy, was sterile. Instead of telling me, instead of exploring options, he had committed a heinous fraud. He had tricked his brother into giving a sample, smuggled it into the clinic, and passed it off as his own. He had violated my body and my trust in the most intimate way possible. "He committed fertility fraud," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "He lied to the doctors. He lied to me. And now he thinks he can just throw Penn away like trash because he's tired of paying for him." "He rejected his own son," Calloway said, his fists clenched. "My son. He stole my child and then abandoned him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Merrick's office and burn it to the ground. I wanted to post the results on social media and let the world judge him. But I called Harlan, my shark of a divorce attorney, instead. "Don't say a word," Harlan commanded over the phone after I explained everything to him. "If we reveal this now, Merrick just walks away. He wants to be absolved of responsibility. Fine, but we are going to make sure he pays for the fraud." "He doesn't care about the fraud," I argued. "He just wants to save money. He doesn't have a conscience." "Exactly," Harlan said. "So we need to hurt him where he lives, the family trust." I paused. Veda, Merrick's mother, controlled the last name Family Trust. It was worth $50 million. But there was a catch, a very old-fashioned, ironclad clause. The trust only paid out to a son who produced a biological male heir to carry on the bloodline. If Merrick had no biological son, he got nothing. We decided to play the long game. Merrick was moving forward with the court case to strip me of funding and terminate his rights. He thought he had won. He was arrogant, already planning a lavish wedding to Zayla in Italy. He was posting about his freedom online, bragging about his new life. I played the part of the defeated woman perfectly. I stopped fighting the paternity motion publicly. I asked for a settlement meeting, acting desperate and broken. "Please," I told his lawyer on the phone, making my voice wobble. "I just need enough to pay the rent. Penn needs clothes. I don't know what to do." Merrick's response was brutal and immediate. "Tell her to get a job. I'm not paying for another man's mistake. She should have thought about that before she cheated." He had no idea that he was walking into a trap. Every insult he threw at me, every cruel text, I forwarded to Harlan. We were building a case not just for custody, but for damages that would ruin him completely. While we waited for the court date, Harlan went into discovery mode. He subpoenaed the records from the old fertility clinic. It was a long shot, but Harlan was thorough. He wanted to find the exact moment the switch happened. We sat in his office, sifting through digital files for hours. Then we found it. A scanned nurse's note from 5 years ago, buried in the intake forms. Patient husband insisted on unverified sample transport. Waiver signed against medical advice. It was the smoking gun. It proved Merrick had handled the container. It proved the chain of custody was broken by him, and him alone. He couldn't claim I slept with Calloway because Calloway was in Europe that entire month, and we had his passport stamps to prove it. The only way Calloway's DNA got into that clinic was through Merrick's hands. "This is it," Harlan said, a predatory smile spreading across his face. He signed the waiver. He sealed his own fate. He documented his own crime. A week before the trial, I ran into Zayla at a coffee shop. It wasn't an accident on her part. She frequented the places I used to go, trying to assert dominance over my old life. "It's so sad, really," Zayla said, leaning against the counter and looking at my old coat with pity. "Merrick is going to sue you for the back pay of support, too. He says you owe him for 5 years of fraud. You'll be homeless, alone. But don't worry, maybe you can be our maid. We'll need help cleaning the big house." She laughed, checking her diamond ring in the light. She was so confident, so cruel. She thought she had secured the bag and the lifestyle she desperately wanted. I smiled at her, a calm, dangerous smile that made her pause. "Enjoy the wedding, Zayla," I said softly. "Make sure the check's clear before you walk down the aisle. You might be surprised by what happens next." She frowned, confused by my lack of fear, but I just grabbed my coffee and walked out. She had no clue that the big house she was dreaming of was built on quicksand. Calloway was struggling. He had stayed in town, bonding with Penn in secret, but his anger toward his brother was consuming him. He wanted to go to Merrick's apartment and beat him up. He was furious that Merrick had stolen his genetic material and then rejected the resulting child. "He treated my son like a prop," Calloway shouted one night in my kitchen, packing back and forth. "And now he treats him like a burden. He stole 5 years of my life with him." "We don't use fists, Calloway," I said, putting a hand on his arm to steady him. "We use the truth. Violence will only get you arrested and help Merrick play the victim. We need to be smarter than him." Calloway took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Okay, what do I do?" "You file a petition," I said, "for full parental rights. You challenge him legally. We walk into that courtroom and we take everything from him by following the rules he tried to break." I had one more person to visit. Veda. Merrick's mother was a cold, steely woman who cared more about the family name than happiness. I met her for tea at her club. She looked at me with disappointment. "I always thought you were a good girl, Eloan," she sniffed, refusing to look me in the eye. "To cheat on my son, it's disgraceful. You've brought shame on this family." "Did you know?" I asked quietly, stirring my tea. "Know what?" she snapped. "That Merrick couldn't have kids." Veda's eyes flickered. For a split second, the mask dropped. She looked down at her lap. "Merrick is a perfect man," she said automatically. "He's sterile, Veda," I said. "And you knew. You helped him hide it to secure the bloodline, didn't you? You pressured him so hard he had to steal." She didn't answer, but her silence was a confession. She had pressured him for an heir so badly that he committed fraud to please her. Now, both mother and son were implicated in the lie. "The truth is coming out, Veda," I warned her. "Be on the right side of it." The court date arrived. The room was packed. Merrick had invited his friends, treating it like a spectator sport. He was glowing, wearing a custom suit, sitting next to Zayla, who was dressed in white. The judge called the session to order. Merrick's lawyer stood up first, looking confident. "Your Honor," he began pompously, "the DNA test ordered by this court is conclusive. It proves that the child, Penn, is not biologically related to my client. This woman has committed paternity fraud. We ask for immediate termination of all support and reimbursement of all past monies paid." Merrick smirked at me across the aisle. The judge nodded, looking at the papers. "The evidence is compelling, Mr. Last Name. The exclusion is clear." It looked like the end. The gallery whispered. Merrick was winning, and he knew it. Harlan stood up slowly. He adjusted his tie and walked to the center of the room. He didn't look nervous. He looked ready. "We agree, Your Honor," Harlan said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Merrick is not the father. We do not contest that finding." Merrick let out a loud ha. Zayla clapped her hands, beaming. "However," Harlan continued, his voice dropping an octave, We have a second DNA test to enter into evidence regarding the true identity of the father and a counter-motion for reproductive fraud against the plaintiff. The room went silent. Merrick's smile faltered. "What second test?" he whispered to his lawyer, his brow furrowing. "And," Harlan added, "we have a witness who would like to establish paternity today." Harlan turned and nodded to the bailiff, who opened the double doors at the back of the courtroom. Calloway walked in. He was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the part of a last name, but with a dignity Merrick lacked. He walked down the aisle, his eyes locked on his brother. Merrick turned pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He hadn't seen Calloway in 5 years. He started to shake. "Your Honor," Harlan announced, "the biological father is Calloway last name. The sample used for the IVF procedure was stolen and used without consent by Merrick last name." A gasp ripped through the courtroom. Veda, sitting in the front row, closed her eyes. Zayla looked from Merrick to Calloway, confusion marring her perfect makeup. Merrick lost his cool completely. He jumped up, knocking his chair over with a loud crash. "That's a lie," he screamed, his face turning purple. "You slept with him, you slut. You slept with my brother." "Sit down, sir," the judge barked. "No," Merrick yelled. "She's lying, it's a conspiracy." Harlan calmly pressed a button on his laptop, which was connected to the court's audio system. He played the recording of my call with Calloway from weeks ago. "Merrick asked me for a favor. He said he was scared to go to a doctor. He asked for a sample. He swore he threw it away." Harlan then projected the passport stamps on the screen. Calloway was in Switzerland during the conception window. Merrick was the only one with access to the sample. He transported it. He signed the waiver. Merrick stood there, panting, trapped in his own web. The audio recording echoed in the silence. He had been exposed. The judge's face turned a dangerous shade of red. He realized the depth of the deception. This wasn't just a marital dispute. This was a crime. Merrick had defrauded his wife, the medical system, and the court. "Mr. Last Name," the judge said, his voice icy. "Did you knowingly use your brother's genetic material to impregnate your wife without her consent?" Merrick stammered. I just wanted a family. It's the same bloodline. It shouldn't matter." "It matters a great deal," the judge roared. "It is fraud. You have wasted this court's time and violated this woman's basic rights." The judge ordered an immediate investigation into reproductive fraud and perjury. The bailiff moved closer to Merrick. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the trembling fear of a man who knows he is finished. But we weren't done. Harlan pulled out the final document, the deed to the last name family trust. He turned to Veda, then to Merrick. "According to the bylaws of your grandfather's trust, the $50 million estate is distributed solely to the male heir who produces a biological son to carry the name." Merrick's eyes went wide. He knew the clause. It was why he did it. It was the entire reason for the charade. "Since Merrick has no biological heir," Harlan explained to the court, "and Calloway does, Penn is his proven biological son. The entirety of the grandfather's estate bypasses Merrick." Harlan handed the paper to the judge. "The money goes to Calloway, to be held in trust for Penn." Merrick slumped onto the table. He hadn't just lost the case, he had lost his fortune. The millions he thought he was protecting by disowning Penn were now Penn, overseen by the brother he hated. The courtroom was buzzing. Zayla, sitting in the gallery, was doing the math in her head. She looked at Merrick broke, humiliated, facing criminal charges and disinherited. She looked at the ring on her finger. The big house was gone, the yacht was gone, the lifestyle was smoke. Zayla stood up in the middle of the proceedings. The sound of her heels clicking on the floor drew everyone's attention. She took off the massive engagement ring, walked to the railing, and placed it on the wooden bench in front of her. "I'm out," she said clearly. She turned and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Merrick watched her go, a single tear leaking from his eye. He was truly alone. The judge was merciless in his ruling. "Mr. Last Name, your request to terminate child support is granted as you are not the father," the judge said. Merrick looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. However, the judge continued, I am awarding Mrs. Last Name $500,000 in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress and paternity fraud. You will liquidate your personal assets, including your penthouse and vehicle, to satisfy this judgment immediately. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Merrick had wanted to save a few $1,000s a month. Instead, it cost him his home, his car, his fiancée, his mother's respect, and his freedom. 6 months later, the dust had settled. I sat on a park bench, watching Calloway teach Penn how to ride a bike without training wheels. Penn was laughing, that same laugh that Calloway had. We weren't rushing into a romance. That would be too complicated, but we were building a friendship. We were co-parenting. Calloway was present. He was kind. He loved Penn not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The trust fund was secured. Penn's future was safe. I didn't have to worry about money anymore. I had started a non-profit organization to help other victims of fertility fraud, turning my nightmare into a safety net for others. I took a deep breath of fresh air. The toxic cloud of Merrick was finally gone. I was free. Merrick was living in a studio apartment on the bad side of town. He was working a data entry desk job, his wages garnished to pay off the last of his legal fees. He had no friends left. He sat on his futon, scrolling through Instagram on a cracked phone screen. He searched for my name, even though he knew he shouldn't. He saw a photo I had posted that morning. It was Calloway, Penn, and me smiling on the deck of a yacht, the Last Name family yacht that now belonged to Calloway. We looked happy. We looked like a family. Merrick's face twisted in rage. He went to type a hateful comment, his thumbs flying across the screen. He hit post. A notification popped up instantly. User blocked. You cannot comment on this post. He stared at the screen, defeated. He screamed and threw his phone against the wall, where it shattered into pieces, just like his life. He wanted to save money by disowning his son, but it cost him his fortune to learn the truth.